Welcome to the Mindful Millennial Podcast, where host Seth Marcus dissects and discusses all things impacting the millennial mind. Mentors, peers, and professionals share intimate conversations on subjects such as entrepreneurship, exercise and health, the blessings and curses of technology, travel, and how to navigate adulthood in this age of information. We're the largest generation in history, and we dictate the future. The Mindful Millennial finds a signal through the noise.
Hello and welcome again to the Mindful Millennial Podcast. I'm Seth Marcus, and today's episode is a very special interview with birthing and parenting expert Ann Kaplan. Ann is a seasoned doula, a birthing coach and educator, and a mother of 4 amazing children. I should know, they're my little cousins. Ann is a brilliant and driven entrepreneur and has been developing her newest venture, Mom Me, for the past year. Mom Me is a program dedicated to establishing one's sense of self after becoming a parent. The Mommy Experience, an event happening on Sunday, May 7th in Denver, Colorado, features educational and therapeutic sessions from experts from all areas of self-care. Ann and I recorded at her house in the Wash Park area of Denver. Our conversations touch on birthing, parenting, and starting a new business from scratch, with peppered embarrassing stories and jabs at yours truly. No one can bust my balls like Ann. I love her, and I'm so excited to see her business thrive. So here we go.
All right, let's get this going. Oh,
Off to
you're
a
so
great
handsome,
start.
Snaffy. What a big boy.
It's a good thing this is only audio.
He looks really good, you guys.
Good. And we've been recording for 5 minutes.
I knew that. I knew you were sneakily recording me, you little shit. Am I allowed to swear?
No, only I can.
Oh, you're going to swear? I can't.
So fucking welcome to the show.
Well, everybody, guess what? Sneffy tried to drink water and poured it all down his shirt, and now it looks like he's lactating out of his left nipple. So cute.
So, Ann Kaplan, welcome to the Mindful Millennial. How are you doing?
Thanks for having me. I'm doing great.
Of course. I'm so happy to be here. We're here at the Kaplan household. It is eerily quiet. Normally,
school is a glorious thing.
Absolutely. Normally, there is screeches and crying and things being flung across the room.
And swearing.
And swearing, both on from the parents and occasionally from the kids.
Hey, no, the kids don't swear. Well, usually they don't swear.
They kind of like phrase it like, I know this is a grown-up word, but you're being a dick.
Can I please say, go fuck yourself? No, you may not. Okay, sorry, I won't say that.
Go fuck yourself. San Diego. So,
San Diego.
So, Ann, the first question that I've been dying to know is, what advice would you give millennials who have turkey sandwich and Seinfeld addictions?
Oh, Sneffy, you've come so far. When Seth first moved out here, he was going through a little bit of a transition time. He was very young, and he kind of, I feel like, well, it's not just you. Everybody goes through this. I think after college, it's kind of a rude awakening. Like, you thought that you had it all figured out. When you're in college, you have like a great safety net. You have an amazing social circle. Your day is full, and you know what you have to do with yourself, and you know what direction you're going in, and you're striving towards this final goal of graduation. And then you graduate, and you know, we could say it in a positive way, the world is your oyster. Anything, it's infinite possibilities, but that's very overwhelming. And a lot of times, especially in Seth's case, he moved out here, so he didn't have a social network anymore, and he didn't have things to do every day. And to top it all off, he started a job that was not a positive experience at all. So he lived in our basement and was basically sad all the time. And he also discovered I don't know, how did we get that box out of Seinfeld or something?
It was my girlfriend at the time.
Oh, that's right.
It was my girlfriend's roommate who worked at Best Buy and got ridiculous deals. So it was like their entire decor was just walls of DVDs. And so I would show up, every week or so and grab season 7, season 8, season 9.
Yeah, that's exactly. Seth made it his job. Obviously in retrospect, clearly you're just trying to escape. You just wanted to veg out and turn off. We all get there, but you were really, really there. So he basically spent a couple months being in our basement, watching Seinfeld and eating so many turkey sandwiches. And I felt like I had...
Well, don't forget the weed.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
also that.
All of this comes together through the glue of the weed.
Exactly. Also marijuana. And I felt like I had gone from having 3 very young children to all of a sudden having a overgrown teenager and not knowing what I was doing and how to help him. And I think our roles were really muddied because I feel we care about each other as friends. We're family. You're not my child and you're not my sibling, but I am older than you. And so, things, I felt a responsibility to you, and then also a frustration of like, God, get your shit together.
No.
It's a dark time.
It was, but I also think about that as one of my biggest transition times, and it is for every 22-year-old that has come from this myopic bubble of college when the only thing that matters is your weekends and your grades and, the amount of spending money you have, or...
I just think it's so nice when things are so clearly laid out for you. You don't puzzling over like existential problems the way you do afterwards.
And decision paralysis doesn't exist in college. It's like, what of these 3 bars am I going to, or which one of these friend groups am I going to hang out with? It's very simple. And it's all that. And then when you leave and you're in Denver, there's what job, where are my friends, what am I going to do for exercise, for money, for what's going to make me happy?
It's not even
I don't
just
know.
that. I mean, take one step back from that. If this is a lesson that it's taken me a long time to learn, but I think you get overwhelmed, like you're saying, decision paralysis. You get overwhelmed. What should I do? What's the right direction for me to go? I mean, you guys, Seth would just get stressed out about whether or not to go to a party or a concert that night. Like it's just like too many choices and too many directions. But what really, that's putting the cart ahead of the horse. The real thing that you need to do is take one step back from that and first figure out, like, who am I? What are my fundamental values? Not that that's an easy question to answer by any means. And it's also something that will change over time. But when you don't have a clear focus on that stuff, that's when decisions become really overwhelming because you literally don't have this compass guiding you. And I deal with this with parents all the time, especially if they have kids. They don't know, do I want to stay home? I thought I wanted to go back to work, but I hate it, or, whatever. There's so many decisions. It's okay if you don't know what the answers are. You don't have to know what your direction is or what your choices are going to be, as long as you have that clear compass of this is who I am, these are what my values are. Then every time a decision comes up or a fork in the road comes up, you're always choosing that direction based on a clear focus on your vision and your identity. Then all the choices you make will be the right ones. Even if you make a new choice down the road, that's okay. You'll always be going in the path of authenticity. So I think that's sometimes is why young people, after they graduate college, and myself included, we feel like we're just like get slammed in the face with just all these decisions, and instantaneously you completely lose sight of the stuff that you thought you had totally figured out because you're just distracted. I mean, the decisions are a red herring. That's not the fundamental issue. So I think if you get in that situation where you feel overwhelmed that way, you can just take a minute and say, okay, that's not really what's important. It's really who am I and what's my direction.
There was a book that I recently read that talked about, yourself is a machine. And when you identify the type of machine that you are and you're very comfortable with how you work, then your decisions are just the output. And so everything that comes out of you is the product of what you have built. A lot of times you keep tweaking the machine because you want different products, and rather than just own the machine and the products come naturally. And I think that's a really difficult thing for young adults to establish, when, especially right now, when there's just so many options, like, on the internet and out there, am I going to travel? Am I going to really dive into a job or a relationship? Every day there's so many options and so many decisions that need to make. And when you don't come from a centered point, it's really easy to lose your focus.
Well, and the truth is, like, you might be 20 and not a teenager anymore, but you're still in latent adolescence. So you don't know who you are yet. And that's absolutely appropriate and good. That's where you should be. I think just being able to constantly or regularly check in with yourself to say, well, who am I right now? That doesn't mean I'm who I'm going to be or who I am as a full-fledged adult yet. And that's the same for me. I'm 37 and I still, I know that I'm going to be a different person when I'm 47, whatever. But, to give yourself permission to not know the answer. And I think another thing that came up for me when you were just speaking was, we put such an emphasis on our society. You meet somebody, the first thing you do is say, what do you do? And you feel like you need to have an answer to that. That's an actual thing. Once again, that's a red herring. That's a distraction. People can ask you that, whatever. But what the real question is who are you? Not what do you do? Because you'll be the same, whether you're podcasting or working in the medical marijuana industry or being a musician or whatever. You're always going to be yourself if you are being mindful about that. Mm-hmm. And the idea with the machine, I really like that, except to still remember that your identity is changing and growing. So you might be a different machine a different time. And it's very easy to kind of say, okay, I figured myself out. This is who I am. This is what I'm about. And then never really revisit that. And that can be a mistake too.
Yeah. One of my tenants or roommates at my house right now is 23 and has been out of school for about a year and is working in the corporate world right now. It's kind of his first job, and he's we talk a lot. We have a good relationship, and he tells me a lot about his confusion of this exact topic. And one of the things that I wish I would have done from the very beginning and have only this year adopted is a writing and journaling habit. And for me, that has really helped me solidify who I am, because I can think, and my opinion of myself varies from day to day, from the amount of sleep I got, from the meals that I ate. It's all variable. So there's something so permanent about just writing it and understanding and seeing this is where I am right now. And then you can reflect on that, and you can really gauge your change at that point. And I bring it up because I know that you've been involved in a journaling process this whole year too.
And that's what I was just going to say is the journaling program that I did was an online program called Healthy Mind and Body. And what I really liked about it was, kind of unguided journaling is not something that I'm very skilled at. So I liked this program because I'd get an email every day that had 4 questions that were very simple to ask and answer. An example question might be like, write 3 words that describe your ideal energy in a day. I could do that. I could say like alert, engage, whatever. But, if I had just been staring at a blank paper, I would have just given up. But the great thing is those questions were very mindful and intentionally arranged to kind of guide me over time towards realizing like, oh, this is a vision I had for myself that I didn't even realize that I wanted to strive toward. So, I think the journaling process or any sort of mindfulness exercise has 2 values. One is to clue you into who you really are and what your fundamental nature is. The second is that you can actually be intentional about changing that if you want to. If there's something in your life that you're unsatisfied with or, brings you pain or whatever, if you are aware of that, which comes from that journaling, then you can actually take steps to change that and realize like, I don't really like being negative all the time, or I don't really like whatever, that I'm super cynical constantly. Or I realized that a lot of my cynicism was about basically being afraid to be vulnerable, right? Like you put yourself out there, now you really could be rejected or your efforts could fall flat and stuff like that. So, that's something I never would have ever realized if I had just been plugging along and, trying to just live my life day to day. You have to take a step back and look at things from the 30,000 foot level for sure.
Mm-hmm. Something that when you take ownership of your own program, of your own business or your own body, all of these things, they're scary. It's easier to kind of step back and be another person in the crowd and kind of be a little bit more judgmental of others and focus on yourself. And something that I think that has brought us even closer than we already were this year is my building of this podcast and your building of the mommy experience.
Right, totally.
You know,
well, I was going to say, like, I think that's been a huge shift I've seen in you, is that it's very easy when things aren't going well or you feel like you have a lot of obstacles in your way to basically play the victim, you know, and say, well, I can't, whatever, be successful at, you know, so let's use the mommy example. Like, I'm launching this parenting program. I'm super passionate about it. It feels like I've like turned my body inside out and I'm just putting my blood and guts and soul out for people to either accept or reject. It's terrifying, but it's very easy for me. And I have at times slipped into this feeling of like, no one's signing up for my event. It must be because there's this other competing event, or it's because the partners I picked stink, or it's because I'm the only one marketing it and everybody else isn't doing it, or it's because I don't have enough money to pay for marketing or whatever.
Just insert
doing,
excuse.
Yeah, exactly. Nothing good can come from that. Only me becoming paralyzed and in pain, basically. Nothing good will come out of that. And all I'm doing is just putting everything off on the people and the circumstances around me and making it more and more likely that I'm just going to give up and just say, well, you know, this isn't going to work. Fuck it.
Yeah.
The times when I've been the most successful at getting enrollment in this event and really promoting it and getting positive feedback are when I put my own desires for an outcome to the side. And I just come at my efforts with a pure intention of, I am so passionate about what I'm doing. I want to help families. I want to help parents. I know I have an incredible gift that I can share with people. And so even if nobody comes to this event, by virtue of them having watched this video that I'm making or read this Instagram post or listened to me speak at their postpartum depression group, they will have benefited from that and I will have touched them in that way. And in that one moment, that was a moment of pure intention and pure exchange. And that moment in and of itself has value and is sacred. So what comes from that, we'll see. But to be constantly thinking about everything that's blocking you only means that you really aren't able to shine your light brightly. Mm-hmm. So, you know, if I go to a postpartum group or a breastfeeding support group and I'm sitting there the whole time thinking like, oh, these people don't like me. They're not going to come to my event. They're not even listening to me, blah, blah, blah. I guarantee the presentation I'm giving is shit. And they're not going to come to the event because I suck in that moment. Yeah.
You're not speaking your truth.
Exactly.
You're in your world of distraction. You know, quantitative value can sometimes interfere with qualitative value. Mm-hmm. It's very easy to be like, oh, this video only got 12 likes, or
right.
you measure it from the amount of comments below or the views or the revenue amount, attendees. These are all quantitative values, but speaking firsthand, like, you have changed my life for the better in the last 8 years. So many ways, ever since the turkey sandwich and Seinfeld years to right now.
Right.
I feel so blessed to have such a strong, familiar community here. And, you know, so honored to be a part of the kids' lives. I think people that really
are super invested in you, you know, like
and you as well.
When we give you like feedback or harsh, mean feedback sometimes, you know, it's always coming from a place of just pure love. And I think it speaks to your maturity. Can't believe I'm using that word to describe you.
I'll take it.
But even in your darkest times, like, you always have been willing to listen and take feedback, and that is very rare. And I think the humility that is necessary to listen to criticism, that is what makes the difference between someone who's going to succeed and grow and change and someone who's going to stagnate, because it's a lack of humility that results in people just closing themselves off to anything, you know, whether it's just information from the circumstances that are around them or from the people around them or whatever, you know, or that just like constantly making the same mistake and not learning from your mistake, you know.
Right.
I mean, we all struggle with that. Mm-hmm. You know, even in your Seinfeld days, you still at least had that core of being able to receive.
Right.
Sometimes you receive too much and then we had to kick you out of our house. But
well, you know, in reflection, to give myself a little bit of credit,
No, we're not doing that.
That's the Anne I know and love. I was overdoing it on the self-deprecation and the self-loathing, and I would get so sick of it that I would walk down to the coffee shop and study. At that point, I was studying marijuana horticulture, and I didn't know that was going to set me off on the path that's led me to where I am today. But
it was almost just like a coping tool, really, at the time.
It was, just kind of, it was like the epitome of laziness and of kind of just self-soothing.
But that's a perfect
pushed
thing.
me
like,
out of the house. I couldn't handle it anymore.
Even talking about it now and saying, oh, that was laziness or whatever, or you were in a dark place. I mean, that's all true. But if you look at it from a lens of love, like it wasn't being lazy. It was you taking care of yourself in the only way that you know how. And to be able to look at that with compassion and say, like, you found your way. Like everybody has their struggle. And, a mentor of mine that I really look up to says all the time, the harder the struggle, the greater the transformation that awaits. So,
Who said that?
Laura St. John. I actually use that all the time when I'm coaching people now. It's very, very, very hard to see the light when you're so mired in darkness. And the other thing I was going to say is when you can kind of get in the habit of self-reflection, everything in your life can become a mindfulness exercise, like including this with the mom me example to continue with that. Like it has been a mindfulness exercise for me to have done this program, and the obstacles that have come up for me have only made me have to work even harder at staying positive and not letting myself go back to self-flagellation and negative self-talk and all this stuff. Like 2 weeks after I announced this, not even 2 weeks, like a week after I announced the date of this thing and started marketing it, in my newsfeed came up a notice for this other conference that's happening the exact same day. And I almost gave up in that moment. And it still plagues me. Like when this person comes up in my Facebook feed, I'm like, it's like I have like this visceral reaction to this. This is like a human embodiment of like all of my own self-doubt that is just coming up everywhere I turn and staring me in the face. And I was so tempted to be like, okay, this is the universe telling me this is not a good idea. Forget it. But I don't know. I'm really fortunate to have had a lot of positive people around me during that time when I was struggling with that. And every time when I was like right on the cusp of throwing in the towel, someone would remind me of something that would make me think, okay, I'm just going to try that, keep going. And now this event is going to be even more meaningful to me for having gone through this. And every moment that reminder of this other event has come up, it has been an opportunity for me to push myself and stretch and grow even more. Like if you think about your self-talk and your mindset as a muscle, each time that this person came up in my news feed or somebody mentioned this conference to me, or I'm having a discussion with someone and they confuse the two events or whatever, that's like the universe putting another little weight on my dumbbell and me having to stretch and try and work even harder to keep my mindset where it needs to be. And I never would have had that kind of growth if this other workshop hadn't come up. So if you're able to look at the challenges that come across you every day as a mindfulness exercise in and of themselves, that kind of becomes your identity, honestly. You become unconsciously competent at doing that, which is another buzzword from Healthy Mind and Body.
Yeah. The theme that I think about when in regards to this conversation is something I noticed about Denver that was in contrast to some of the other cities that I've experienced is Denver is a very self-competitive area.
Yes.
And I think that it's person to person. This isn't like everybody here does the same thing. But in relation to what you're talking about, you are playing a game of golf. You're trying to beat your score from yesterday. You're trying to perform better than you have previously.
Right.
You're not trying to beat the other people who are out there, you know? And that was something that I noticed here when, in the mountain biking community or in getting into yoga, it's about improving yourself. It's not about being more attractive than the person next to you or more successful. And I think that this mindfulness practice and building your own business, whether it's a podcast or an event or an education service, any of these things, when you start focusing on the intimidation of your competitors or striving to be better than them, it's such a toxic energy that stirs in you, and it doesn't fuel the right type of success.
Totally. But I also think that can be a slippery slope also when you're in competition, so to speak, with yourself. If you're doing it from a place of self-affirmation and self-belief and just because the striving is nourishing to you, that's wonderful. But if you're doing it from a place of negative self-talk and self-flagellation, that can almost be more toxic than that dynamic of comparing yourself to other people, because what you're doing to motivate yourself is like this, basically like a battery pack of self-loathing. Oh, if you don't do this, you're a loser. Or, come on, you did this yesterday. Why can't you do it today? Or if no one comes to this thing, or if this or that doesn't work out, then you failed. That is almost, at least for me, I'm speaking from my own feelings, so I'm revealing a little bit about myself. But that for me is my inner demon, is comparing myself to myself and feeling like I'm basically in an abusive relationship with myself. So I have to be very, very conscious and intentional about the words that I use verbally and inside my own head to talk about the efforts that I'm doing and the results that I'm having and things like that.
It's the plague of ambition. It's always a battle whether or not you're accepting of how far you've come and grateful for where you are, as opposed to constantly looking forward to what's next and what you haven't achieved yet.
Yeah, and you're just chasing an accomplishment or something. You're not even recognizing how far you've come or where you are right now. And what does that mean? If you follow that to its logical conclusion, you're just going to spend your whole life feeling like you're not enough.
Yeah. Especially if you don't take the time to get to that 30,000 foot view and state what your goal is.
Right.
People are unhappy because they never really figured out what they wanted to be happy. That can just be such a waste of this precious life that we have,
I totally agree.
To consistently be looking at something else and it's just a fuzzy view, but you want it and you don't have it yet. And that can just plague your entire life, your day in and day out. Once again, something that the journaling has helped me so much to understand, because it's like, look, man, like there's 3 lines you got to fill in right here. What are you going to say right now? It forces you to have a truth.
I mean, just for listeners out there who maybe are reticent to try journaling or whatever, it doesn't have to be journaling. Any sort of mindfulness exercise. It could be, for me, it started with just like going to see a therapist, honestly. That forced me to check in with myself in ways that I would have just been like, I'm fucking pissed and depressed and I don't have time to think about it. I need to do laundry right now or whatever. It doesn't have to be a journaling exercise. It could be meditation. It could be, there's a million apps out there now that you can use to kind of just help yourself tune in, and it'll change and grow over time. Like there's no way 10 years ago that I would have even been receptive to some of the changes that I've set out for myself this year. So it has to be meeting you where you're at, and don't discount mindfulness or self-reflection because you haven't found the right vehicle yet. Yeah.
The quote that inspired me to start this podcast is, give me 6 hours to chop down a tree and I'll spend the first 5 sharpening the axe. And that quote has always grabbed me. We are so busy, like I can't possibly meditate or journal or go to the gym because I have too many emails, and so you're just throwing yourself into this day with no direction. And that can be so damaging, and you just run around in circles rather than take logical steps forward.
Have you watched that documentary? I don't know if it's still streaming on Netflix, but it was when we watched it anyway. It's called Happy, and it's literally a documentary about happiness and like what scientists have discovered about it, and kind of broken it down into like people who report that they feel satisfied and happy in their life have these, I think it was like 4 components. I don't remember. It's been a while. But one of the things that they talked about in there that I really didn't give enough credence to until I watched that documentary was flow, and how having something in your life where you get to a flow state is so important. And I think that's one reason why the first 2 years of having a child are so maddening to me, is that you never go 1 second without being interrupted. Like I can almost never even finish a sentence without something coming up for me with the kids. So my brain was like constantly in this state of stimulation and interruption and distraction. I never got into a flow state. And since I watched that video, have been paying credence to stuff that I liked to do before, but I didn't really recognize it as like essential health benefit kind of thing, like an artistic pursuit, for example, or like doing something creative or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'd really like to ask you a bit more about parenting and how that has led to your newest ventures and what's coming up for you. When I first moved here, Georgia was 2
Brand
months
new.
old.
Yeah.
River was 2, Elijah was 4, and now Elijah's 12, River is 10, Gigi just turned 8, and Skyballs is 3 and currently upstairs, and Dad is playing interference.
Exactly.
Thankfully.
Really
or else we would have a much
an awesome partner.
a much muddier audio.
Yeah.
And the silence that we were treasuring, it would be completely gone.
Yeah. Yeah. So I basically have been pregnant or nursing for 13 years straight. It's an amazing and incredible thing to say, actually. And I always knew that I wanted to be a parent. And then when I had my first, well, even before I had my first kid, my first pregnancy was a massive disillusionment. I'd always thought, oh, pregnant women are so beautiful and I want to look like that. And it's just like a miracle. You're growing this baby, and birth is just like, it was all just like rainbows and unicorns. I had no idea what I was talking about. And then I got pregnant and I didn't feel good. I didn't feel good about how I looked because, you know, news flash, it's not like you have a personality transplant just because you get pregnant. If you hate how you look and that's your mindset, you're just going to hate how you look but be pregnant instead. And that's exactly what happened. It wasn't like all of a sudden I thought I was like freaking a supermodel or something like that. I felt just as shitty about my appearance as I always had, only now I was 60 pounds heavier. So, you know, it was just like a string of disillusionments. And then my birth didn't go as well as I wanted it to. It was kind of a mess. And I just had wicked postpartum depression. And that was like a huge, just such a letdown. And I really was kind of had like a existential crisis, honestly, because I had spent my whole life thinking this was my destiny. And not only had I reached it, and I was like 25. So it was like, okay, well, mission accomplished. Now what do I do for the rest of my life? It's all downhill from here. And then also it sucked. Like I had spent my whole life striving for something that I fucking hated. It was awful. And I really struggled with that. And I remember standing over my son in his crib, sleeping at night, and just weeping, like tears were falling onto my child, and looking at him and thinking, this is the biggest mistake I've ever made, and it's the only thing I can't undo. And it was too late. I felt like I had destroyed my life and there was no going back. It was really, really dark. But I also felt like, well, there was my cynical side, right, kicking in, that also was sort of my defense mechanism or coping tool. I was like, well, fuck it. You know, like we already have one kid. I don't want to have an only child. I guess we're going to have another one.
You made your bed.
Yeah, exactly. I had a friend at the time who, she was like my best friend, and but she didn't have kids. None of my friends had kids. I was very isolated because I had kids very young. Anyway, I was telling her how depressed I was and how my life like bore no resemblance to the life I had led just a few weeks previously, and it was all destroyed. And she just looked at me and said, well, I don't know why you're complaining. This is what you wanted. And that just reinforced to me, like, well, you're on your own. No one gives a shit about your problems, and fucking figure it out.
Yeah, welcome to the real world.
Yeah. I honestly don't know how I made it through those first 2 years, but I got knocked up again. And I kind of had like this little seed inside of me of like, that is not happening to me again. Like it was kind of my like moment, my Scarlett O'Hara moment of, as God is my witness, I will never have an epidural again. I just approached my second pregnancy totally differently. I went whole hog with childbirth education. I had a doula, blah, blah, blah. We had an amazing birth with the second kid. It was a gorgeous unmedicated water birth. It was insanely easy, honestly, because I had done so much work to prepare for it and get my head on straight and process the trauma I'd had from my previous experience. And my biggest piece of advice in preparing for a birth is it's the mental piece that you need the most, not the physical stuff. Especially if you have a doula or a really engaged midwife, they can help you with the physical stuff. Well, what position to do or what sounds to make or whatever. But if you are afraid, if you have anxiety and you don't work that shit out before you go into labor, it will come up for you, because when you're in labor, you are a primal animal. None of your front part of your brain is capable of holding that stuff back anymore. Your raw animal self comes out. So, that is what I didn't do the first time. And the second time, I spent months exercising those demons and facing my fears. And that's why I had an amazing birth the second time around.
What was the next chapter? What led you to getting into childbirth services from
like
that
making that
experience?
kind of my calling instead of just my...
If I remember right, you were a doula before Georgia was born, correct?
I became a doula while I was pregnant with Georgia.
Okay.
So I struggled after River was born. So just for people who are listening, if you're getting confused, oldest Elijah.
There's a lot of Kaplans.
Elijah's the oldest one. He's the one who I was weeping over. Second is River. He's the one who was the healing birth, water birth, blah, blah, blah.
Was that the reason why you named him River, or did it have something to do with it?
No, we were choosing, we wanted his name to start with an R because of my grandmother had passed away right before I got pregnant with him, and her name was Roxy, so we wanted an R name, and it was between River and Reuben. And
I'm so glad you went with River.
I know, right?
Reuben.
We almost named him Reuben because my mom and Mike's mom both were like, "You're not gonna. That's a terrible name." Blah blah blah. And
and those
can't
sandwiches
believe
are
I
just
almost...
delicious.
Yes. Well, Reuben sandwiches are delicious.
Well, we're not arguing.
I don't want to
We don't see eye to eye on everything, but everyone agrees that
I'm not throwing shade on a Reuben
delicious.
sandwich. I just want to make that abundantly clear. That's a sidebar. We finally, we had written Reuben down on his birth certificate, and then Mike came to pick me up, and I was just like, you know what? We're just naming him Reuben because of our stupid parents. We both want to name him River. What are we doing?
Right.
Those two birth experiences and their juxtaposition is what led me to pursue birth work. My confidence was completely different. I was brave. I stood up for myself. It helped me individuate from my parents, which I desperately needed to do. It helped me stand up to pressures from family and work and realize things about myself that I had really turned a blind eye to. Like, having an empowered birth can be the catalyst for a completely different direction in your life. And that's what made me realize, people need to know about this. Once I actually had those two experiences, I was completely obsessed. It took me longer than it should have to realize, oh, I should do this for my career. But in the meantime, I basically was just a birth junkie who was blabbering at everybody who got pregnant and being super obnoxious.
Sure. And before we get too far down that road, Georgia is the third child.
Oh yeah, Georgia's the third, and Sky's the
youngest.
youngest. That's right. So then I got pregnant with Gigi. I kind of had another existential crisis because I had been thinking about going back to work. I used to be an engineer, and then I found I was pregnant, and I was like, well, okay, first of all, I'm not going to go judge job interviews while I'm knocked up. And second of all, even if I got hired, it doesn't make any sense. We were going to have 3 kids who weren't school aged yet. So we would have to pay for 3 kids to be in childcare. So I felt totally trapped and
empowered.
Yeah. I felt empowered about my body and my rights and my ability to birth and stuff like that, but I felt trapped by my circumstances and society. I mean, it's just that same sort of victim language that we were just talking about. I felt like, well, fuck, when is it going to be about me? Okay, this is it. I'm going to take this next year to really get my shit figured out, and by the time I turn 30, I'm going to be the best me. And then I found I was pregnant, and I was just
that.
God damn it. But Gigi's pregnancy was what catalyzed me to realize, okay, what do I actually care about? Birth and women and women's empowerment and taking ownership of your wellness. So I decided to become a doula, and then it was great. I mean, it's so nourishing and rewarding, and there's a lot of challenges to it, but it's obviously something that is really important for me to do, and it feeds me. So every time when I've been close to being oh, this is just too much being on call, or this isn't working for our family or whatever, I've never fully given it up. I just instead have to kind of think outside the box of, well, okay, we had a fourth kid. Being on call is not working right now. I'm going to teach instead. And what do you know? I love teaching. I love it even more than attending births because I think it makes a massive difference. So now I teach childbirth education. And then, same thing, had another kind of like come to Jesus moment when Sky was a toddler of like, okay, how can I make this business be something that fits easily with my family, and there's nothing about it that I dread, because sometimes the truth is I do dread going to births. I dread being on call because I feel like I'm not in charge of my time, and
you're a parent of 4 children, you just get a call at 11 o'clock at night when like right after
11
the last
o'clock
kid.
would be great. It's the ones that are like at 4 a.m. and it's going to freaking destroy the next coming day, and you have to figure out childcare and all this stuff. But it's like when you're with that mom, you give yourself over completely to her, which is well and good. That's how it should be, and that's how I want it to be. But it's very depleting, and birth can take a very long time, and I can be with a mom for 36, 38 hours, and by the time I'm done, I have nothing. I am a shell of a person, and it takes me a long time to come back into my body and let myself be the boss of me again, instead of this woman and her body and her needs and this holding this space for her between life and death. I really needed to figure out a way to make this practice something that was helpful to me and my clients.
And reach a larger audience,
well,
too.
Yeah, absolutely.
You have such a wealth of knowledge from everything. I mean, you're such an intelligent person, and your experiences with the 4 children, all of the doula work leading to Ann Kaplan Child Services, and now Mommy, you have the potency of working hand in hand with one person, or a mother and father, and now you're spreading that to a large audience, and I can't wait to see how this whole thing just evolves.
I'm really excited. There's so many new developments in my practice that are going to allow me to be touching so many more families, and also supporting new birth workers who really need mentorship. When I first became a doula, I sought out more experienced people to learn from, but not everybody does that. That just happens to be my nature. That's my personality to do that, but not everybody has that intrinsically within them. And also, because those things aren't readily available, you have to go out and find it. You have to seek it. I'm so excited that I'm able to add mentorship and coaching for birth workers as part of my practice. I have to give a lot of credit to you also, because you are the one who kind of opened my mind up to the possibility of using online teaching tools to reach so many more people and be able to offer these services to anybody, anywhere. You don't have to live in Denver to hire me as a mentor. You could be anywhere. Most of my sessions are online.
Yeah.
And teaching online, I was very reticent to do, because the way that I teach is extremely emotional, and we use art in my classes, and we do ice to simulate discomfort of contractions and things like. I just didn't think that I could have the same kind of impact on mothers remotely. But I did a few kind of pilot classes, and I did see that I was making a huge influence on them. And also, if you have a very narrow idea of how you can serve your demographic, you're really doing them a disservice, because there's plenty of people who you might be able to help, but they're only ready or willing to receive you in a certain way. And if you are the one setting the terms of their reception, you're doing both you and that person a disservice. And there's a million people out there who just aren't ready for whatever reason, or aren't able for whatever reason to come to my home and take a class in my classroom space. Well, that doesn't mean I can't help them and touch them.
Right.
Now I'm able to have such a much more expansive approach to my practice that allows me to be helping like 10 times as many people as I did before.
Yeah. And soon 100 times as many people.
Yeah.
As before,
I mean, it's really can only grow. And it's really wonderful to have that kind of feeling of abundance towards something that seemed very limiting before.
So we are recording this on April 20th, but the Mommy event is quickly approaching.
I know.
So
I can't believe it. It's
I want to
actually
give you a
happening.
minute to plug your event and to talk a little bit about it.
So Mom Me is a parenting program that I started, and it's all about helping parents who feel overwhelmed or unsatisfied to feel like themselves again. And the way we do that is through educational and therapeutic sessions that kind of focus on the different aspects of yourself that get off kilter when you have kids. So we have nutrition, fitness, visions and goals, parenting, because we have to actually figure out how to make all this stuff work with kids in our lives, and identity. So you have these therapeutic and educational sessions with a visions and life coach, with a parenting educator, with a nutritionist, with a exercise physiologist. So the program is forever. It's evergreen. It's never going to end. It's a movement about self-integration for parents. But we do have this finite deadline coming up, which is our first workshop, and that's on May 7th here in Denver. And we actually have people coming in from out of state. I'm just the first person who booked this thing is coming from Minnesota, and I had this like moment of like panic, like, oh my gosh, what if this doesn't deliver, right? You know, but once again, it's the universe is just adding a little weight to my dumbbell of like, no, this is an opportunity for you to stay positive and all this stuff. But anyway, anyone can come to it. You don't have to be from Denver, obviously. And it's a whole day long where you're literally having hour-long sessions with all of those different practitioners. Plus, we have massage that you can add on, like a little treat for yourself, and a yoga class at the very end. That's kind of our closing ceremony to kind of integrate and assimilate all of these amazing realizations and discoveries that you've had about yourself throughout the day.
And a chance to in person meet part of this community that is being built online and all around Denver and the surrounding area.
Exactly. And it's certainly not meant to be a one day and you're fixed thing. That's impossible.
It never is.
Right. It's really meant to be a starting point, kind of like a jumping off for these parents of this 1 degree of change in their lives that could lead them in a completely different destination. So I really love the analogy of like kind of steering your ship. If you want to get somewhere completely different than where you're going, literally you just need to move that steering wheel 1 degree and your destination is now entirely different. So this day can be that for these moms, a kind of a turning point for them. And it doesn't have to be moms. Men are coming too. Sneffy's coming.
Sneffy is Seth Marcus, the host of this podcast.
Yes.
I'm a very professional individual.
Sneffy, you're so professional. Good for you, buddy.
I'm wearing a collared shirt.
You always wear a collared shirt.
Shut up, Ann.
You're so broy.
I think I'm pitting out right now.
Me too.
Live video right after this.
Stay tuned for pictures of our armpits.
I think with that fantastic conclusion, what better way to wrap up this podcast? Anne, thank you so much for giving me this
I'm really
last
honored
minute.
that you wanted me to be on your podcast.
So great to spend time with you and to talk about it. And I'm so proud of you. And Mommy, coming right up.
May 7th. You can check it out on mommeexperience.com. So that's MOMME experience.com. And you'll see tons of information on there. You can follow us on Facebook.
And all the show notes and connections to Anne will be available on the website
That's awesome.
and below the episode. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.